Hello and welcome to Stand Up. This is episode 74. Joining me today, Jeff Jarvis. We'll talk about media, journalism, and why experts should be on TV. Then, speaking of experts, Dr. Meghan May, who's a microbiologist, will join me to talk about the epidemic and how to communicate science better. Should we do this? Let's do this. Time to stand up. Hello, family. Hello. Hi. Welcome to Stand Up, where every episode, which is now every day, I'll invite smart, thoughtful, often experts on to join me to talk about all of the important issues that matter to you, your family, your community, your country, your planet, and what else matters besides the pandemic. So much to talk about. And joining me talk about it for the opening day is my dad, Chisel D, up in Syracuse. There he is. Hey, Dad.
Hey, Pete. Hey, we're snuggled in here. We don't go anyplace, don't do anything, just living a life of boredom.
Living a life of boredom. Thank you for joining me. Lots to talk about and lots to react to for the Tuesday episode of Stand Up. Let me toss out some numbers here for everybody. Total confirmed cases as of 7 p.m. last night, 855,000. This is worldwide. Total deaths, 42,032. Total recoveries, 176,714, Dad. That's global. The United States is leading the world. Yay! Yay! We're leading the world. And let me give some applause. This is fantastic. Total confirmed cases as of 7 p.m. on Monday night, 186,265. Total deaths, 3,810. Total recovery, 6,910. More than 100 sailors have tested positive for the coronavirus aboard a nuclear aircraft carrier. Did you hear about that, Dad?
No, that I didn't hear about. No, that's terrible. Because you're on a nuclear, you're on a ship, and it's once it gets going, that's terrible.
Yeah, once the ship gets going or once the virus gets going?
No, the ship is fine, whatever it wants to do. The ship can dock. It's not going to matter to the ship. The ship doesn't care. It's the people that's a problem,
Yeah, big problem on a ship, much less a naval ship. More than 2,000 people could die every day from coronavirus in April. They're talking about between 1 and 200,000 deaths in total.
Yeah, and that's in the United States.
That's in the United States.
Yeah. That means we're all going to know somebody who gets killed from this.
We're all going to know somebody, yeah. That's a good point.
When you think of it, yeah.
Now, how do you and Mom feel? Because up in where you live in Onondaga County in upstate New York, there haven't been hardly any cases, right?
I wouldn't say hardly any. I mean, we got a lot of people. We had a couple of people die, and we've got some. There's some cases in the hospital that I think the hospitals are managing. They're okay, and they had a Syracuse doctor on today. I think it was on CNN, and they were interviewing him, and he's from Syracuse, and he said it's terrible. He had to, he watched a woman die, and they had all fallen in love with her. She was just a sweetheart, and her husband couldn't come and see her. She's in the hospital dying, and it's not good. It's not good.
Not good.
Not good. That's a polite way to put it, huh?
You know what else is not good? The Dow and S&P had their worst first quarter performances ever, losing 23.2 and 20% respectively. Stocks snapped the longest ever bull market in history in March, Dad. You're watching.
The market is the market. It's just whatever it's going to do. Whatever it's going to do. You if you're in the market, you cannot panic in times like this. And they talk about the market as if that's the controlling interest of everybody's life. And I'm invested in it, but the fact of the matter is, if you're really smart and you're buying stuff, you're going to make a lot of money on this market. So it's whatever it is, it is. I mean, that's just a part of it.
That's only one measure of the economy. You're right. But now economists today at the Federal Reserve in St. Louis are projecting the number of unemployed Americans, Dad, could reach as high as 47 million, 32% unemployment rate as a result of the coronavirus. Though it could be short-lived. It could be like a V-shaped unemployment rather than like a U-shaped unemployment if you're thinking about the graph. But still, 32%, 47 million people unemployed?
That's what we've come to. You know, the thing that I don't understand is I read in the local newspaper here that they're going to pay $600 more per week to unemployment. So that means if you get a couple $100 for unemployment, they're going to, I don't know, maybe I read this wrong. I read it about 6 times, but it's an incentive not to go back to work. I mean, people are going to make $800 a week, $900 a week on unemployment. There's no tax on it, I guess. I think that's what they said. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. I can't follow it. I know they're going to give money out to people. They're going to give everybody like $1,200 and then $500 for each kid, and and there's no tax on that, and that's great. But what are you going to spend it on? Nobody's leaving the house. You're not buying gas. Gas is dirt cheap now anyway. So you're going to buy.
You're not insinuating that people are going to be have too much money. I mean, they're going to spend it. They're going to spend it on.
They're not going to spend it right away.
I don't know about that.
Actually, many people are going to make more on their unemployment than they were working.
Many people.
And they're not going to spend it right away. It's just the whole thing is just it's crazy inverted. Everything's upside down.
The president had a very strange press conference today. I want to get your reaction to it. Let's see. Can I play this for you?
Well, you can use a scarf. A scarf is a lot of people have scarves, and you can use a scarf. Scarf would be very good. And my feeling is if people want to do it, there's certainly no harm to it. I would say do it, but use a scarf if you want, rather than going out and getting a mask or whatever. We're making millions and millions of masks, but we want them to go to the hospitals. I mean, one of the things that Dr. Fauci told me today is we don't want them competing. We don't want everybody competing with the hospitals where you really need them. So you can use scarves. You can use something else.
Five times he said scarf. I was counting them.
There you go.
That's great. Your mommy has a scarf. She's got a lot of scarves. I think I'm going to start wearing a scarf around. Just that ought to work. Yeah. No, he's great. He's very entertaining. He's very optimistic. And it was 5 years ago, April 2nd, that Bill Gates. Did you see his speech?
No.
5 years ago, Bill Gates said, "We've got to take this Ebola thing and run with it because it's time to come up with a universal vaccine because there could be a pandemic and it could kill millions, 5 or 10 million people." He says millions of people are going to be killed not because of war. April 2nd, 2015, he said that. I just saw it.
All right. Well, I looked it up and found what my dad was talking about and threw it in here after our conversation. Here's Bill Gates from, like he said, April 2015 TED Talk warning of exactly what happened. Good call, Dad.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we've invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence, but we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic.
Well, Bill Gates has been right about a lot of things, and he was certainly right about that, but what would happen if we failed to prepare?
The failure to prepare could allow the next epidemic to be dramatically more devastating than Ebola.
Well, the fatality rate has already passed the Ebola epidemic. So what else, Bill Gates, from 2015?
There was a lot of heroic work by the health workers. They found the people and they prevented more infections.
Well, there's been a lot of heroic work, but these healthcare workers can't find the people and they can't prevent the infections because of the nature of this illness. You don't know you've got it, and people are spreading it without knowing it, and we don't have the testing, and it's just way different.
The second is the nature of the virus. Ebola does not spread through the air. And by the time you're contagious, most people are so sick that they're bedridden.
Okay, well, this ain't Ebola. This is Corona. It does spread through the air, and people they're carrying it before they're sick and bedridden. So this is worse, right?
Third, it didn't get into many urban areas, and that was just luck.
Well, I guess we've run out of luck.
If it had gotten into a lot more urban areas, the case numbers would have been much larger. So next time, we might not be so lucky. You can have a virus where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market. The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism. And so there are things that would literally make things 1,000 times worse.
I can think of a few things that would make it a lot worse, like completely getting rid of the pandemic team and having a narcissistic idiot in charge of the country. Would that make it worse, Bill Gates? I bet you didn't see that coming back in 2015.
In fact, let's look at a model of a virus spread through the air like the Spanish flu back in 1918. So here's what would happen. It would spread throughout the world very, very quickly. And you can see there's over 30 million people die from that epidemic. So this is a serious problem. We should be concerned. But in fact, we can build a really good response system.
And then Bill Gates went on to warn about exactly what is happening and how to prevent it, and nobody listened, at least not the right people, or they stopped listening. Because we've been preparing for some kind of terrorist attack, and if you're more worried about a terrorist attack than a pandemic, you've been duped. And now back to the conversation with my dad.
And, the other thing is, I've been listening to the MSNBC and CNN, and Chris Cuomo has it? Did you hear it? That's terrible. He's like one of my favorite guys. I love that guy. I saw him and Cuomo, the governor, on last night. It was funny because, they're brothers. So, I mean, they're both jabbing one another. It was great to watch that. It was a great interaction.
Yeah, it's very entertaining.
If you want to just blow your brains out, just listen to Hannity and then listen to Rachel Maddow. And then the two of them, they go away, people. Just stop it. And then...
Oh, come on. You can't compare Hannity to Rachel Maddow. Hannity.
No. They're just too radically left and radically right. No. And then you listen to Michael Steele. The guy used to be the head of the Republican Party, a party that used to be a very reasonable group of people.
They were never reasonable. They were always. No, they were not. They were always.
So anyway.
No, when were they reasonable? You tell me right now. Let's argue about this. When were Republicans reasonable? When?
In the 70s and the 80s. I mean, there was a lot of. I think the best president.
They were always super racist, right? They were always They were always pushing racist policies, right? Republicans.
The best president this country's ever had was Eisenhower. I believe that in my heart. He did more for this country than any other president has done. Here was a guy who was a general. He wanted nothing to do with war, and he built our highway system. He got everybody working. So, there was a lot of good Republicans out there. And Michael Steele, I listen to him. I go, this guy's so reasonable. And he's saying that the Republican Party is so far off base. It's crazy right now. And he's blaming everything on Trump.
All right. Well, I think there's plenty to criticize Eisenhower for, but let me just go back to your horrible comparison between Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow. That's preposterous, and I'll tell you why in one sentence. You can criticize Rachel Maddow for any number of things, her presentation and so on, whatever you want. Good luck. I mean, I'm all ears. But one of them is a white supremacist and a conspiracy theorist, and one of them isn't. So comparing them is preposterous.
I don't think Rachel Maddow is a racist.
No. I was talking about Hannity, of course. So don't compare them.
I can't listen
Sean
to either
Hannity
one
is a
of them.
Conspiracy theorist. Okay, not being able to listen to somebody is very different. One is a conspiracy theorist and extremely dangerous. That's Sean Hannity.
Okay.
That's how we got here. These conspiracy theories, these Republicans don't trust medicine or science. True or false?
Oh, I know. That's the crux of the whole problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Democrats do.
Okay.
There's no equivalency.
Yeah.
Yes? No? You disagree?
No, I agree with that. That's Democrats and Republicans. As I'm saying, the Republican Party is the wheels are falling off, and with their beliefs. And the Democrats, I mean, don't get me going. I'm not a fan.
Well, I don't know. Well, I want to get you going. I want to know what you're critical of Democrats for specifically.
Well, there doesn't seem to be a middle ground anymore. I'm very much a centrist, and there's no middle ground. They ripped all the middle ground out.
Joe Biden is an extremist. He's the nominee.
You know I love Joe Biden. I mean, with his gaffes and everything.
Well, how can you say that there? But this is a preposterous analysis. You say in one heartbeat, you say one breath, you say that there's no middle ground. Then I say the Democrats nominated Joe Biden.
They didn't nominate him yet. You still got that other guy in there.
Well, I mean,
you got Bernie Sanders, who wants to screw up the entire country.
Oh, well, you don't like Bernie?
Bernie Sanders is unelectable. He should go away. Let Joe Biden get the nomination. Bernie, go away. Nobody wants you anymore.
All right,
you're an old man. You're shaky.
All right,
go away.
Well, he's the same
I
age
know.
as Biden.
Look at Biden. Look at Bernie Sanders. They don't look the same age. They don't act the same age. That's for sure.
Well, very controversial analysis from my dad today. Before I go to my first guest, Jeff Jarvis, any other thoughts about the news, about coronavirus, about how you're living with it?
We're not even living with it anymore. We're just sitting here doing nothing all day.
Just existing.
We're just existing. I made pea soup tonight. Yeah,
all right, that's good.
It's very good, actually.
And what else are you guys doing? Your mom?
Well,
Walking.
we get up late. We go for a walk. Now we're doing the stairs every day. We're trying more and more flights of stairs. That's and now I watch a lot of Netflix. Yeah.
Oh, you got any recommendations?
You know what I've been doing is on Prime. I've been watching all the old Paul Newman movies. Really good actor, Paul Newman. Anything he does is great.
I was wondering if you watched that tiger guy there.
Yeah, I started watching that. I'm still that guy's really strange. He's got like 167 tigers. I mean,
yeah,
I mean that's weird.
Would you ever pay to go see like big cats like that?
I love cats. No, I wouldn't. No, it's terrible. I mean, I like cats, but I like cats better than dogs. But I wouldn't pay to go see tigers. See the tigers at the zoo over here. They got about 12 hours of roaming, and they still look like they're all cooped up. It's kind of like your mom and me right now.
Yeah,
we're a couple of caged tigers.
Everybody's caged.
We're
and any other inspiring, hopeful, or optimistic thoughts or advice for folks listening, Dad?
From me, inspiring and hopeful. Jeez, boy, you're really pushing the envelope now. I think the whole thing sucks.
Yeah. And I think artfully captured how everybody feels.
Every once in a while, I just stop and go, "How did we get here? What happened? Yeah. What the hell happened? Why are we here? It's crazy. It just doesn't make any sense."
Well, one thing is we just haven't trusted science enough. Scientists enough. They warned about this, as you mentioned, with Bill Gates. All right, Dad. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Love you.
Okay, Pete.
All right.
Take care.
All right. It's a pretty sound, interesting analysis from my old man. Was Eisenhower a good president? I don't know. Maybe he was. The hell do I know? Before I get to my first guest, want to remind you to consider a paid subscription. We are now over 500 paid subscribers. Check the link on the show notes or go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick or just go to PeteDominick.com and sign up for a paid subscription for as little as $5 a month, all kinds of extras, and you get to be a producer of this show, and I will be communicating with you on a regular basis, so please sign up. And now let's get to my first guest. Coming up, by the way, Dr. Meghan May, after my conversation with Jeff Jarvis, who I love. He is a big star on that. Howard Stern loves Jeff Jarvis because Jeff Jarvis has always been a great media critic and supported Howard even when others didn't. But now Jeff is a teacher, a professor at the Craig Newmark School of Journalism at the City University of New York. Really smart guy, and I wanted to have him on to talk about how the media is handling everything. Here now, my conversation with Jeff Jarvis. Here we go. Joining me now is a guy who I have so much admiration and respect for. He blogs about media and news at buzzmachine.com. He co-hosts the podcast This Week in Google. He's the professor and director of the Toe Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the City University of New York's Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. And he tweets at Jeff Jarvis, the legend, joining me during the pandemic. What has taken me so long to get you on the show? Thank you for joining me.
I am so happy to see you, my friend. You look healthy, not fevered. That's good. I haven't heard a cough yet. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, keep your distance, sir. Keep your distance from me. I just interviewed my neighbor with like a 15-foot mic cord because he's a teacher, and I'm doing a show about teachers. Okay, I have a ton of questions to ask you, but first and foremost, you have been screaming that the cable news outlets specifically should not be covering the President of the United States press conference. And, as much as he's a liar and a horrible person, how can you say that the news shouldn't cover the President's news conference live as it happens? Make the argument.
So here's the rationale. And it's not me alone. Margaret Sullivan in the Washington Post says this. I think that Jim Fallows has said this. Others have said this. My rationale is this. our job in journalism is to inform the public. This does not inform the public. It disinforms the public. It is not our job to be the stenographer for the president. And so we should at least delay the broadcast until we can fact check and add context to everything he says.
What would happen if CNN and MSNBC especially said that they weren't going live because they just couldn't trust the information the president was sharing? I mean, wouldn't there be a tremendous amount of outrage and arguments coming from different sectors of the public as well as journalists, and then you'd have a backlash? Like there isn't already? And the problem now is that he's using this for campaign. He's now cut into the local news. He's cut that out. Where's Joe Biden? It's like a Where's Waldo? Biden was on the 2:00 hour of MSNBC today. So it's terribly unbalanced. It's another rationale is that this is a campaign. And yes, he may be president by accident, but that doesn't mean that he should get an unbalanced amount of coverage, even in a crisis. Other thing is, like last night, MSNBC cuts off when he leaves, when you might actually get some real information from Fauci, but he's not on live. That's backwards. We've got to take away the lollipop out of his mouth. And yeah, there'll be backlash, but we've got to do it. All right. What about the journalists who are asking him questions and the way that he has been handling them? Obviously, like a child who's been scorned on a playground, Jeff Jarvis. But do you think they're asking the right questions, even whether or not it should be live? You giving them what kind of grade? Yamiche Alcindor, bless her, and for the abuse she puts up with, and credit to the CNN correspondent for giving her the mic back last night, which is a great thing. No, generally. I think she does a good job and others do. The argument has been made that they should put scientists in place of the political correspondents in that room and ask scientific questions. This is all about expertise. I put together a Twitter list of more than 500 epidemiologists, virologists, infectious disease physicians, frontline doctors, NGOs. If you go to @JeffJarvis and look at my lists, you'll find the COVID list there. I'm immersed myself in expertise. And that's the only thing that gives me hope is science. And we've got to get science back front and center in the coverage here and not this dork. Yeah, you've got a great post at buzzmachine.com titled Time for Experts. And it's interesting because what I've been hearing from my show has always been inviting experts on and asking them questions rather than me blathering on, although I do. But I beg that people check anything I might say because it usually comes straight from my ass. But it's the experts who count. And so I've been talking to certain policy experts for years, scientists, academics, and so on. And they have been screaming about the media for such a long time that there needs to be more experts on TV. This is exactly what this post is about. It's a really good and important post at Buzz Machine. And you're arguing what should the cable news and other media outlets be doing? So I have this list of 500 people. I could talk to any booker on any cable channel and give you 20 or 30 scientists who ought to be on your air. Yeah. I'm going to interview myself one tomorrow. I'm going to do this shtick because, hey, we're all stuck at home. So why don't we all have a podcast? Everybody's going to have a podcast. Yep. My dad's got one. I'm going to interview one of the trenchant critics of the New York Times. About a week ago, the New York Times had a op-ed by a guy named Dr. Katz, who normally shills about sugar and is an advisory board on the California Walnut Board. And why did they give him the space and the tremendous megaphone of the New York Times to say that, oh, maybe the cure is worse than the disease, things that have come since out of Trump's mouth? And so this doctor from Yale has been screaming about this brilliantly on Twitter, saying, no, talk to the experts, talk to the epidemiologists, the infectious disease doctors. They're there. They're on Twitter. They're comparing notes. It's phenomenal, Pete. It's just phenomenal to see how science progresses, and they're helping each other, asking each other questions, giving each other answers. That's where it is. I think the thing that's always difficult is finding someone who is a really smart expert, relying on the best science. They know what the best science is, which is usually an aggregation of the best studies. And then they're able, Jeff, to articulate it and communicate it to an audience like myself with an associate's degree in humanities. That's sometimes hard to find.
It is, but that's where among the 500, I wouldn't recommend them all. Some are very geeky, but a lot of them are excellent explainers. In the Post, I put up, there's two in the UK who are spectacular. One is, last name is Sridhar, who's a brilliant epidemiologist at, I think, University of St. Andrews. And I've seen her on BBC again and again and again, just giving hell to UK authorities for how they have completely bollocksed this and how they're killing people. And there's lots of people like that. Some of them are getting on the air. I mean, give credit to the cable networks. There's a fair number who are getting on to MSNBC and CNN, but there's a lot more. And the other problem I have with cable networks is they're so repetitive. They have the same people on all the time. Yeah. I think if you started to see, and we want to do that, we want to make stars of some of these people, but the more voices you hear from the more perspectives who are saying the same things, which is the opposite of what Trump the dork is saying, the better for us.
Yeah, it's you can't have your medical correspondent cover everything, and it's often best to bring in somebody who knows a lot more. Who do you think? I mean, your Twitter feed at Jeff Jarvis has turned into a really important source for information, and if anybody's not following you, they should, because you're doing a great job there sharing all this expert information. I get so much from your Twitter feed. Who should we be listening to? I mean, there's a wide range of experts, but it seems like epidemiologists are a really good source because they can talk about how and why a virus spreads, but also really important, I think, humanizing this issue as much as possible, listening to physicians and nurses and those on the front lines. You've been sharing a lot of their anecdotal stories. How do you describe on this show your Twitter feed and the potpourri of experts that you have in there?
Well, see, I wouldn't follow my Twitter so much because I still yell at Trump and things like that, but follow the list that I have, the COVID list. And yes, you're going to find a lot of people. The person I'm talking to tomorrow is Dr. Greg Gonsalves at Yale. He is brilliant. He's gone after the Times. He's gone after others. Dr. Mark Lipsitch is an epidemiologist at Harvard. Tom Inglesby is at Johns Hopkins. Angela Rasmussen is a virologist at Columbia. Dr. Florian Kramer at Mount Sinai, I think he's the one who came out with the first data to create a serology test so that we can understand whether we have the antibody or not. Dr. Jeremy Faust has a great newsletter online called Brief 19. Dr. Ellie Murray is an epidemiologist who makes really good, simple explanations. Richard Horton is the editor-in-chief of The Lancet. That's just a quick list.
Well done,
and there's more like them. There's one amazing woman named Emma Hodcroft, who's in Switzerland, who is heading a project called Next Strain that is taking every single strain of the COVID virus and understanding where it went and how it went around the world. There's a journalist named Kai Kupferschmidt, who's German, who's really, really good. I just probably gave you 20 names right there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And you can check Jeff's Twitter feed and, of course, that list that you put together, which a lot of people are dependent on. That is great, great work. How do you see the adaptation and the changes that journalists have made in terms of taking down both paywalls for certain stories and that decision? Then you've got independent media people like myself that are doing a lot of work or upping the work that they're doing. Why not? Because we're home. And finally, obviously, you've got the obvious cable news media. Many of those anchors, if not all of them at this point, are broadcasting from home. How's that going? So maybe start with the newspaper websites.
The news websites, I think, are all in all doing a pretty damn good job. The op-ed page is not so good, especially the Times and the columnists of the Times. Bret Stephens is being Bret Stephens, need I say more? Tom Friedman quotes Bret Stephens and quotes this guy Katz. They have a little echo chamber of ignorance going on there. So the op-ed, not so good. But news side, I think, has been doing a good job. The problem is going to be that New York Times, Washington Post apart, the scorched earth of business that's going to hit the news industry from this is just awful. Gannett just announced today they're going to require every employee making over $38,000 a year to take a 1-week furlough per month for the next 3 months. That's hard. That's really hard on people. I've told we at the Newmark School we talk with a lot of small news sites and they are suffering badly. And so the problem is the advertising revenue, of course, has gone away with the advertisers' businesses. And so they're just going to try to keep their nose barely above water and survive. But out of this, I believe that we're going to see a lot of media outlets die. And we've got to figure out how to rebuild media from the ground up, from the ashes.
You think this pandemic and its effect on the economy will kill major media outlets as well as smaller media outlets all the way across the board?
I think that, yes, some majors will go. Not the New York Times, not the Washington Post, not the cable channels. They'll come out. But I do think that newspapers that have been suffering across the country, a lot of really good new entrepreneurial efforts to cover news in new ways. They barely had their nose above water, and now it's glug time.
Yeah.
How are you doing? How's your business, by the way?
It's up. I mean,
Yay.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know if people are now listening to more podcasts or less. I think you could argue for both ways, more because people want more information, maybe distraction, entertainment, but maybe less because people usually listen on their commutes. So it's hard to know. I've heard mixed opinions from people, but I'm using the funding model, Patreon, and I've gotten a whole bunch more people. So it's for me, it's been all right, and I'm also upping the broadcasting. I mean, a lot of people doing 5 days a week versus 3. And so, for me, I can only speak for myself, but what have you seen and what have you heard from other independent media outlets like myself and others?
So I'm on the podcast This Week in Google, as you were kind enough to plug before, in the Twit Network, This Week in Tech, run by Leo Laporte.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, well-done show. He
is really good at this, and he's had to furlough some employees because his advertising is down. His audience, he thinks, might be down a little bit because of the driving. We do long podcasts that fill people's commutes. I was talking to some local bloggers last week on a conference call, and they're really suffering because they require local advertisers, and the local advertisers' businesses are all shut. Macy's just announced it's furloughing all of its employees.
Yeah, I saw that.
So we're not going to have, people will still buy from Macy's online. A, no, and B, they can do that out of a warehouse, and they don't need to stock and staff department stores across the country.
Let me get back to that earlier question about what about all these cable news broadcasters trying to do what me and you and a lot of others have been doing, which is, do things from home and other ways and use other sources and technology. I mean, they got the best technology. CNN, MSNBC. Are they doing a good job with it?
I think they all in all are. The one question I'm trying to find out the answer to is who's getting the home setups and who isn't.
Yeah. What
is the pecking order there?
Yeah.
Which I think that's very interesting to be had. And I think that they're not giving them out to everybody.
Right.
Some people look great. Some people miss their hair and makeup. I love seeing. I actually wish they hadn't put in the backdrops in the homes because I love seeing the backdrops.
Yeah, the actual.
The homes.
Yeah. I think so too. I always love to play, and I'm about to with you. What's in your backdrop?
So Casey Hunt, surprised, has books arranged by color. I never would have guessed that. I tweeted that, and she said, "No. I read a lot. I know where the books are, but I also like design."
That's funny.
Michael Beschloss, the historian.
Yep.
I've just seen his once or twice, but God, it's beautiful.
Is that right?
It's a good business being a historian, yeah.
Who's got the most beautiful live shot is a great question on Skype or whatever remote technology that you're using. The other question I had for you is you got to be somewhat concerned about all of the stories that aren't getting covered because of this story. No one's going to be given a lot of credit for saying that the news media is not, covering this well enough. People are covering it and outlets are covering it from every possible angle on the health and economy and environment, et cetera. But there are a lot of other stories, of course, that aren't being reported. What do you think about that? How much do you miss the other news?
I do, and this is an earth-shattering story. It deserves huge coverage. I don't question any of that, but we've got to block out some time. We also have to start blocking out some time for the presidential election. Now, number one, Bernie, would you just
give up?
Admit it, Bernie. Good go.
It's over.
And so we've got to start standing behind Biden, and Biden has to get airtime. He's got to be out there. I want Biden every single time out there, leaving me saying, "Damn, I wish he were president now." God, he's got the plans. Yes. But right now he's grandpa stuck in the basement.
He should go live after every press conference with his people there and go through everything he got wrong and then say, if I were president right now, I would have A, B, and C. Done.
Brilliant. Yes.
He's got his own podcast now, too, apparently, Biden.
Yeah, he started a podcast. He started his tweet about it was something like no joke. Well, I didn't think you're joking. Of course you should do a podcast.
Well, unfortunately, the whole show is him trying to figure out the technical issues. What do I do? How do I? Jeff Jarvis at Jeff Jarvis. Follow him on the Twitter. And as always, I appreciate you joining me in conversation. I always learn so much from you. And let's talk again.
So good to
soon.
see you and hear you, my friend. And I'm glad you're up broadcasting in the world and keeping us sane.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, there you go. The great Jeff Jarvis. Always fun talking to that guy. Love him. Go follow him on Twitter. Tell him you heard him here on the podcast, Stand Up with Pete Dominic. And email me, everybody. Email me. Let me know that you're listening to this show right now. Or text me, even. I'm not going to give out my number, but if you email me, I'll give you my number. standupwithpete@gmail.com. And now for something different from the office of the governor of California, here is a message from Larry David.
Hello, I'm Larry David. Obviously, somebody put me up to this because it's generally not the kind of thing I do, but I basically want to address the idiots out there, and you know who you are. You're going out. I don't know what you're doing. You're socializing too close. It's not good. You're hurting old people like me. Well, not me. I have nothing to do with you. I'll never see you. But let's say other old people who might be your relatives. Who the hell knows? But the problem is you're passing up a fantastic opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity, to stay in the house, sit on the couch, and watch TV. I mean, I don't know how you're passing that up. Well, maybe because you're not that bright. But here it is. Go home, watch TV. That's my advice to you. If you've seen my show, nothing good ever happens going out of the house. You know that. There's just trouble out there. It's not a good place to be. So stay home and don't see anyone, except maybe if there's a plumbing emergency, let the plumber in and then, wipe everything down after he leaves. But that's it. Okay.
I love that guy. So funny. All right, let's move on to my second guest, or third if you're counting my dad. Dr. Meghan May is a microbiologist and an academic and a great person to talk to about all things coronavirus. She's been on the show a whole bunch of times. I interviewed her live on Twitter as well. If you want to go back in my Twitter timeline and see my conversation with her on Skype, that was fun. Here now, welcoming back the brilliant expert, Dr. Meghan May. Recording now with Dr. Meghan May again, but this time we are actually seeing each other on Skype, and it's great to have video confirmation. You actually have a face. Dr. Meghan May, thanks for joining me again.
There it is.
There it is.
Good to talk to you.
Great hair. You have a lot of great hair. What is your
Thank you.
What is your secret?
Luck came out that way.
Thank you very much for. There's got to be science. There's got to be science behind it, Meghan. Come on.
No, it's dumb luck. If I had to put any effort into hair, then it would not be a good scene.
So I have a lot to talk with you about tonight. But how are you? How are you doing? I hear you have some very bad news. You're out of garlic.
It's tragic. There are so many casualties to this, and my stores of garlic have been chief among them. We all have problems, of course, and I'm grateful that is my biggest one at the moment, but still.
I love reading your
it was tragic.
I love reading your Twitter feed. Follow her at drmay5. Week 3 of telework social distancing. Monday, I am out of garlic. This pandemic has jumped the shark. All right, so let me just, before we...
Not a good dinner last night.
Well, good. But before, I ate a whole sleeve of Ritz crackers last night, and I don't care what anybody thinks. No cheese.
That's top shelf.
Just the crackers.
Well done.
Plowed through them. All right. So... let me just go back. I was thinking about anticipating talking to you tonight, and I thought, you reached out to me, I want to say early January for the first time. When you first heard about this virus and the statistics and the stories coming out of China, did you think then, did you have a pretty strong inkling that this is going to spread across the globe, or were you hoping against hope that there would still be some chance of containment?
I didn't think it was going to end up like this. To be honest with you, the previous experience that I was drawing on for, what are parallels where something like this has happened before, the containment and the effort were so strong, and the missteps that happened in previous pandemic diseases, I perhaps naively thought we would have learned from, right? And so I'm kind of specifically thinking of two examples, and one is the original SARS outbreak, where the Chinese government had initially classified it as a state secret, and it was going on in China for months before the rest of the world knew anything about it.
Right.
And I thought, and as we talked, the first time we talked, I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, in that I was still holding out some reservation that they were this time being entirely honest about everything, but it wasn't classified as a state secret. So there seemed to be at least some progress there on their end. And I really thought that, the rest of us would have learned from the experience that we saw even just 17 years ago with that. And the other I was thinking of was the early days of the HIV epidemic. I would have thought we would have learned not to politicize something as critical as a disease that can kill you and can certainly touch everyone around you. And we apparently forgot that lesson a bit.
Tomorrow is April 1st, April Fool's Day, and actually going through your Twitter timeline, I noticed that there are certain...
It's the one thing I tweeted today.
Yeah, tell me what those tweets are about, because I agree.
Oh, yeah. So this is something I do every year, is just to say that on April Fool's Day, it's your friendly reminder, fake pregnancy announcements, not funny, because there are people to whom that's really not a joke. And it can be people who are struggling with fertility. It can be people who've had pregnancy losses or stillborn babies. And it's kind of a... I don't want to make people cringe at this term, but it's kind of a trigger for a lot of people. And It's just, even though most of the time when people do those pranks, it's totally innocent, they don't mean anything by it, it can be hurtful because you often don't know who's struggling with that. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm a comedian and I don't even like pranks, but there's also, no fake pregnancy pranks and no fake COVID pranks either, right?
Yeah, that's my other big one. That's... I'm going to go out on a limb and hope that would not be a thing, but just in case, I'm going to preemptively tell you that's not funny. Don't do that.
Thank you. Okay, COVID-19 has infected nearly 850,000 people across the globe, killed more than 41,000. Where are we at as a country here in the United States? How would you explain this on the radio here on the podcast without the charts in front of you?
Well, I think that the first thing that we have to kind of understand is that as a country, we're not in one place. We're in several places depending on where we are.
Great point.
It looks like, looking at the data in Seattle and in California, they seem like they've hit a peak and are starting to flatten out a bit. It doesn't mean things are going down. It doesn't mean it's over, but it means they're starting to get a sense of what their trajectory is. For New York, and obviously this hits very close to home for you, but as you guys saw, even as recently as a few days ago, you were still going up, but the past couple of days have started to look very preliminarily like we might be starting to flatten out there too. Mm-hmm. That being said, there are entire parts of the country where we can tell it's going to continue to be bad for the next several weeks. New Orleans is the one that has really emerged as a big, huge problem. And I was talking to a colleague in Birmingham, Alabama earlier today, and he pointed out they're starting to get a huge onslaught of cases, but it's very clear looking at the timeline and trajectory from New York and Seattle that they're not even close to hitting their peak, but they will. And it's going to be a little rough until that happens. So I think we have to kind of step back and look at it in terms of we're not in one place as a country,
right,
because it's a big country with a lot of different densities and frankly, we're still struggling with this idea of access to care and access to testing. So
is that the sun coming through your camera?
Oh my God, it is. Sorry about that.
Being drawn into heaven? That's perfect.
Yeah, did I just die? What just happened?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, different places, different numbers, different situations, urban, rural, and there's different circumstances as well, depending on where you live. It might not be as bad in certain rural areas, but there's not as many facilities and hospitals and access as well. So there's a lot of different pros and cons and variables in terms of where you live. How much evidence do we have that the issue in New Orleans is because of Mardi Gras and partying and the parade? That's why that spread. Is that why? Do we know if that's why that's a hot spot? And probably
that's the conventional thinking is that, there was probably because obviously Mardi Gras is a huge tourist draw. And so it's not only just that you have a big giant parade and you have a ton of people. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Bourbon Street on a regular day.
I've been there on a regular day, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've never been for Mardi Gras, but having been there for a regular day, you're, wall-to-wall people just on a random Tuesday. And so Mardi Gras is just an incredible, dense crowd. And most of the crowd is not local. And so you had a bunch of people come there, potentially intermingle, and then go back to wherever they came from. And then that was right, if you think about when Mardi Gras happened, that's right when nobody could get tests anywhere. And so this idea of it not being obvious that was kind of the point of introduction for a lot of people, and that was leading to this explosion in cases. They weren't reported because it couldn't be confirmed, because that was when it was very, very difficult for anybody to get tested. So the thought is that when all the dust settles and we all go back and do the math and do the modeling, that's probably had a huge role in spread and everything else.
I guess it's good then that pretty much every city in the country canceled their St. Patrick's Day parade, right?
Yep.
How much?
Exactly.
I mean, parades
As an
must
Irishman,
be.
It hurts, but
Yeah, I hear you. But I mean, like parades must be the example used in your science courses to teach about how a virus can spread. I mean, people, all on top of each other in densely packed crowds.
Prisons are pretty good too, but yeah.
Good one. Yeah. Really important point. So you wanted to talk specifically about an important issue with me, which was about how we science, Dr. Meghan May. It has a lot to do with the way that scientists think about science and the way that scientists communicate science. And one of the important points that you made in your notes to me is that disagreements over interpretation of the data aren't personal. Explain why this is a really important point, and explain why you wanted to talk about the importance of science communication.
Right. So one of the important pieces, and this I absolutely had a come to Jesus moment at a PTA meeting of all places, right? Where I realized that this was exactly a problematic dynamic, and that it was something that we as scientists do rather differently. Probably lawyers as well can do this, that a lot of people just don't do. And it's the idea of, I can disagree with your interpretation of something, and I can very forcefully say that and back my argument up. And when we leave the room after that meeting, me and my friend who were just pounding the table a minute ago at each other are going to go have lunch and be fine, because that wasn't personal, that was professional. And when, doing the same type of thing in my personal life, say in a parents group or something like that, where you say like, no, this is the reality. Here's the point I'm trying to make. Here's the reason why I think that, X is greater than Y or whatever. That's not me attacking you. That's me taking an assessment of something and giving you my interpretation. And It's not personal. And so I think that sometimes if that's not part of your profession, because being able to do that diplomatically is something that we're not all, that we're not born with. You
Certainly
have to kind of learn how to do it. And when your entire profession is posing an argument and then using specific data to back up your position in your argument and for why a certain action should be taken, you tend to get, it's part of your professional skill set. But then when you have to go out and make that argument to people and you use that same frame of reference, sometimes people feel attacked because they see that as personal. And the reality is, I think we would do much better communicating science if we realized that that's sort of a weird way to talk to other people, especially if they're friends of ours. It can make people feel attacked. And when people feel attacked, they're not very likely to listen to you.
Yeah, I've had a big problem with that my entire life, and I'm not a scientist.
Maybe you're just a flaming a-hole, Maybe
You're just an asshole, and I just love to argue. But you make this point that we need to learn to think like scientists, or at least to understand how we should interpret things, and especially now. That's a really critical and important point now. We're getting absolutely bombarded with information. Everybody's doing a show, and everybody's doing a special, and unpacking all of this information. It's very hard for any one of us to know what to think because the scientists don't necessarily even know what to think. So help me understand what we're all supposed to do.
Well, it's really hard. And there's an element of this, too, that this is another piece that I think is just not kind of on the radar screen of most people. And there's no reason why it should be. But when people hear on the news or read online or whatever that there was a new study describing, a new treatment, or that ibuprofen might actually kill people who have this, or, that this virus came from snakes, whatever it is, a lot of times what these reports are referencing are what we call preprints, which is a study that someone did quickly and wrote up. And instead of doing what we usually do, which is send it to a journal, and you have a scientific editor who looks at it and either says this is crap and sends it back to you and rejects it, or they say this could be okay. Let me have 3 other independent experts review it. And the reviews are anonymous. So as I mentioned, we will pound the table and argue with each other face to face. So those anonymous reviews are vicious. But what that means is that it tends to be vetted, to an absolute degree that's really hard to imagine that there's any holes in that study, and depending on where the study's published and all that kind of thing. But with these preprints, which are what a lot of the things you hear on the news are derived from, that process hasn't happened yet. So
journalists should not be going with that information then.
Right. But I think the trouble is everyone wants.
Right. Well, everybody wants. I mean, it's like when you have a story or a study that's not fully baked and it says coffee's either good or coffee's bad. Right. You go with it because either way you get clicks, and that's not science, and frankly, it's not journalism either. It's just for-profit clickbait.
Exactly. So you have an element of clickbait. You have an element of, I think there are a lot of journalists who really do want to bring the latest information to people who are scared and who desperately want information. And when you see a preprint from somebody that's, got a lab at University of Chicago, or I'm making that up. I'm not thinking of any specific one, but you've got someone who's got a real university lab, and they do great work.
No, I know what you're saying, because then we all sit around, and I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I'm talking to a stay-at-home mom, and we're at the park, and I'm like, did you hear about that Harvard study that says that steak will kill you if you eat it twice a week? And it's like, well, it was a Harvard study. It must be true. And it's like,
good. Yeah.
The both of us sitting there on the bench are completely convinced. And that is so much of what passes for, quote, intellectual, thoughtful conversation about science. And, you think you're being responsible. I read it in the newspaper. It said a Harvard study. It must be true. But what you're saying is...
But the thing is that if they haven't been through this process, and to be honest, I don't remember offhand. I've published 40-something odd papers that have gone through peer review and come out the other end and been published. Mm-hmm. It's never a fun process, right? The best thing that can happen is you get smacked around only a little. And what has happened for some of these is that they get, asked to have like a major revision. You have to do more experiments. You have to add, 5 times as much information as you've already put in. You have to, but honestly, I can never think of a time where I've had to do this really extensive overhaul of a paper where it wasn't better, more clear, and more sound on the other end. So this process, even though it feels like hazing, it's really purposeful. And this is the kind of thing as I'm talking to you, it's like I genuinely don't know if people are familiar with that process existing at all.
No, I can tell you they aren't. I can tell you they aren't. As someone who's been in the media and who's talked about and with scientists for years and years, they aren't. You say that there's 2 kinds of people who react favorable, but react to favorable but dodgy information. Those who take it and run with it because they need the news to be good, and those who point out the need to verify it before running with it. And nobody likes the second guy. That's a great point about, and it really goes to, clickbait or to making a profit of some sort, right?
Yep. Nobody likes the second guy. Guess how I know? But that's the thing. Like, I'm that jerk at every meeting.
Fine. Glad we got you.
But yeah, that's the thing that's so important, and especially right now because people are scared. People don't know what's going to happen. People don't know when they're going to be able to leave their house. People don't know if they're going to ultimately be furloughed, be laid off, lose their, shop that they own. Everybody wants to hear good news, which makes it, first of all, harder to be the second guy. And second of all, so much more critical that you listen to the second guy, because this ends by us doing this the hard way, which is every place that it's put in these stringent controls, that's where you're starting to see the peak and the flatten.
Right.
And the cases go down rather than up. And so the sooner we all kind of make peace with that and just get through it, the sooner this will start to turn a corner. But that being said, and I love that you conveniently ignored the Chernobyl drop-in as well.
You keep wanting to force this Chernobyl show. You're trying to make me watch it. Other people are trying to make me watch it. And I'm telling you, real life is scary enough. You can try to sell it one more time. You love talking Chernobyl.
I do. It's so well done. No, but I'm going to go back to my previous argument that it was a scary event. But the scary event's not the point. The point is, how the actual regime dealt with it.
Right.
And it just has this really great, it's kind of dark to say it's a running joke, but there's sort of this running line throughout the first catastrophic episode where there are these groups of people taking these radiation readings, and there's this number that's given that's on the low side, and all the people who are the first type say, it's not great, but it's not terrible. And all the people of the other type are saying, that's as high as the meter goes. And so it's sort of this it's like the perfect example of those two personalities. The one that says, like, it is convenient to my worldview for that to be the measurement,
right, versus,
okay, I understand you're giving me that number, but I need to make sure that it's not that number because that's as high as the meter goes. So it's just right now, we need those people who are saying, no, that's as high as the meter goes. I need you to show me something different.
What is the most, if you can think of something, egregious mistake that you think has been made by any level of government? Because I read this New York Times article the other day or yesterday, Meghan, where it really documented with like 50 sources in the federal government, in the White House, about this kind of lost month of how many mistakes were made. You get the CDC not having the reliable test to roll out, and just any other number of mistakes made at CDC, at FDA, at HHS, and obviously within the White House and the president. But is there anything specifically that has jumped out at you to point to say, man, there has been some very terrible mistakes made by those in government?
The biggest failing that we had was not being able to test people. And I think we talked about this before, the idea of why didn't our test kits work? And, we talked about the idea of, well, the controls didn't work, so you had to scrap everything and start fresh. That does happen sometimes. It's nobody's fault when it does. It just happens. However, that being said, had the synthesis of these tests, had the evaluations of them started earlier, then they could have overcome that failure at first and been ready when we needed them.
Right.
And they weren't there. And even up until a few days ago in some parts of the country, you could still hear people having the experience of being told, don't bother to come in, I can't test you. It's getting better, but in some places that is still happening. And that's, to me, the greatest failure. And if you look at the countries who truly managed this the best way that they could, it was the ones that were really aggressive with being able to test people. And were really aggressive with being able to quarantine people when it was clear that they'd been exposed.
Right.
And that just is the biggest failure I can think of. And the other, kind of a secondary one was this hesitation of restricting movements, and this is a future failure that I'm just afraid of, for lack of a better term. It was just that the delay in ramping up production for additional ventilators, right. I just worry that is going to be catastrophic.
Right.
Because even if, and the order finally went out for GM to start making them, but that was 2 days ago.
Yeah, I guess GM workers walked off the job because they weren't. The workers, labor actually had to force management to. I'd love to get inside that story. Somebody's going to report that story out in terms of that decision making and why it wasn't made by management and why they were forced by labor. But that's fascinating.
They're absolute heroes.
Yeah.
Risk their job in a very unsettled time to force the hand of management. That was absolutely a bold move, and I'm so glad they did it. But the idea of the time between they start trying to, retrofit all the equipment to actually produce these things to having a functional ventilator in a place where it's needed. I mean, there's going to be a nice lag on that, a few months at the very least. And so I just worry that this happened too late and we haven't seen it yet, but we will see it. Yeah. And when we do, it's going to be tragic.
All right.
On that happy note.
Is there anything fun to end on? How are you guys doing? How's the fam? How are the kids? Some sense of normalcy?
Oh, God, no. We've got, there are 4 extroverts in my house, and we're not allowed to interact with other people. So it's interesting on a daily basis. There's usually some kind of hysterical pet or kid incident on a Zoom meeting. I'm surprised nobody's wandered through here, honestly.
I know. I'm hoping for one of those. All right, Dr. Meghan May, follow her at drmay5. As always, really appreciate your time and expertise. We all need to learn science better, and more importantly, we need to learn how to translate it as members of the media, journalists, etc. It was a really important conversation. Thank you, Meghan.
Good to see you in person.
Well, there you go. Another episode of Stand Up in the Can. Thank you very much to my guests, my dad, Jeff Jarvis of the Craig Newmark School of Journalism, and Dr. Meghan May, who you can follow on Twitter right now at drmay5. Always great to talk with her, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Let me know who you want to hear, what you want to talk about, and thank you for your support on Patreon. Your paid subscription is what sustains this podcast. Put them out every single day, looking for new ideas, new opportunities, going live on Twitter and Facebook. So follow me there at Pete Dominic on both of those. And I will talk to you tomorrow. Lots more to come right here on Stand Up. Thanks so much for your support, for listening. I love you. Bye-bye.